All right. Happy Friday, everyone. I am Danielle, back with another Digital Summit interview. Our series is here to showcase our speakers and sponsors and attendees who love Digital Summit, are participating in 2024. But more importantly, we're talking about top news and marketing and what's going on to keep you informed. So I am very, very excited to be joined today by Jennifer Peters, the Senior Manager of e-commerce at OLLY. OLLY Vitamins and Supplements is going to be speaking at our Orlando event, February 26th and 27th. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's so exciting.
Yes, this has been great. So it's Friday, so we're just going to start talking about what went on this week and dive into a little bit about what you're going to be talking about in Orlando during your session, which I know our team is really excited for. So we're in Data Privacy Week. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but Data Privacy Day, National Day, is coming up on Sunday. That has a lot to do with your role in e-commerce, holding a lot of responsibility when it comes to driving revenue and data privacy and management, and specifically about what you're going to be talking about in Orlando as well. So I was reading up on some of the news that's coming out this week. We've got more states that are passing bills in their Senate. New Jersey and New Hampshire started this year off by passing some bills. New Jersey passed right away. New Hampshire's kind of on its way there. And then just some companies out there sort of touting the fact that they're data privacy moguls and putting out press releases saying new certifications that they've gotten, which is great. You know, I think for the industry standard, that's awesome to see. CanScanner was one that came out that, you know, one of the big apps, document scanning apps that's out there and has a lot of, private information for folks. So in your role at OLLY, and maybe some of your other roles as well, specifically when it comes to data privacy, what's the most common and easily missed best practice that you see when it comes to just managing data privacy as a whole?
Well, this is going to sound really obvious, but I think it starts with understanding what personally identifiable information is. And I think, when you're working with a lot of different teams, you're working with, at OLLY, our e-commerce team is a separate team from marketing. You've got people on the marketing side working with customer data. You've got people on the supply chain side working with customer data, and they don't all think about it the same way. I mean, even especially on the supply chain side, they're just filling orders, but at the same time, that is data. So Everyone understanding this is a thing that must be protected. This is a thing that we must restrict access to. Is probably the basics. Is just understanding you're touching something that has risk associated with it and has a lot of value, and we need to protect. That, I think, is the first place to start, is just making sure everyone cross-departmentally understands what they're touching and the risks involved with it.
Yeah, and that's not an easy feat. I've definitely been in those situations, in those rooms where we're talking about personal data and people are like, well, we just want to send out this email, or we just want to try this new campaign. And we're like, no, we don't have access to that data, or it's something that we don't feel comfortable giving or sharing. And, I find myself in those conversations a lot, and I imagine you have as well. So that kind of leads perfectly into your session that's going to be taking place in Orlando. The title is going to be the e-commerce balancing act, how to maximize innovation while minimizing risk. So without going into too much detail, because we want to get people excited and down to Orlando, what's your session going to be about, and what are you the most excited to share with the audience?
My session is about managing customer data in the most broad sense. So really, you're not going to walk away with a law degree. You're not. Absolutely not. I mean, we're all practitioners in the e-commerce and digital marketing space. And so it's really about knowing what you need to know and going back to defining what is personally identifiable information. Where does it live? How do you restrict access to it? And then, that piece, compliance is never the most exciting thing on any agenda at any show. I know this. I know nobody likes it. It's a bummer, but it starts with education, and then from education goes into how can you apply this to your everyday life. And there are little easy things you can do, whether you're an 8-person brand or a 10,000-person brand. There are a lot of things that everybody can do that will contribute to keeping that data safe. So that's really kind of what my session's about. It's just about understanding the basics, and then how you take that out and talk to your partners, talk to other vendors. Data privacy should never stifle innovation. And I think that's a common misconception, is that there's so many rules. We can't even do this. Why even bother? There's just too many restrictions. And that's truly not the case. And, the number one, this is a nugget that we'll definitely dig into in my presentation. Rule number one is work with partners who care about it as much as you do. And that is not that difficult, but you have to ask the questions in the conversations that you have when you are looking at a new piece of MarTech, or you are talking to someone who would be a net new vendor for you. Just make sure they care about it the way you care about it. And that is half the battle right there.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. There's a lot of different topics within marketing that if you're aligning yourself with the right vendors, you find it's easier to make those things happen, which I love that you pointed that out. And I think we're in a situation now, and you probably dig into this a lot, but there's so many tools that are available that teach you how to be compliant. So we've got these, obviously your great session, but there's so many tools on the internet now that help you. You don't have to be an expert in it. You can rely on these tools. And it's obviously sussing out which tools to use is probably half the battle because there's so many. But I remember coming in as a first-time marketer, as a brand marketer, that was one of the conversations I had. I was like, well, what do we do for ADA compliance? Because I had learned about it in school. And I was like, what do we do for our specific website, And so putting that website through a website evaluator and looking at the tools and kind of figuring out what that report looks like and what things we were doing wrong, and then gauging how easy it was going to be to implement those changes. And some of them are so easy to implement. And I think talking to
Absolutely. I mean, you think so. ADA compliance is also something that I'm going to be covering in my presentation. It's kind of like the two things you should be afraid of, but not really, because they're easy to manage. With ADA compliance, it really is just understanding what the rules are, and that the rules are constantly shifting. I mean, at least with data privacy, the states that have laws are quite defined. Like, exactly what you're dealing with. With ADA compliance, it's a lot fuzzier. And the higher profile your brand is, the more risk you have, because, people want to get in on that. And there's a lot of like icky legal stuff going on out there that truly isn't about accessibility, but it's more about just making money in the business. But the most important thing about ADA compliance is that at the end of the day, you want everyone to be able to use your site, all the features, get all the benefits, be able to check out and have a great experience, whether they're using a page reader or whether they're, not sight impaired or whatever it is. It's important that everybody has access. So it's really easy to get kind of caught up in the risk management piece of ADA compliance. But at the end of the day, every brand wants every person to be able to use and experience their website.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to get our message out to as many people as possible. And if you have everybody on your team really centered around that message, I think that's so important, because everyone from your designers to your web developers to your marketing copywriters understand that accessibility is part of the DNA of what you're doing, and they can call you out when you miss stuff. I remember I've had designers going, nope, the ratio of those colors isn't going to work. I know you like the way it looks, but it's not happening. So I've always been so appreciative of everybody in the marketing sphere, which compiles so many different skill sets, really focusing in on that. So yeah, talking a little bit more specifically about ADA, that the set of compliance, and like you said, the rules are changing constantly, but what would you talk about some pieces of advice as for people to start when it comes to ADA compliance? Because it's kind of, if you haven't really dug into it at all or had no schooling around it, it can be a little bit overwhelming.
It definitely can be overwhelming, because most people don't have the one essential tool that you need to see if you're compliant, and that's a page reader. Like, that's what sight impaired people are actually using on your site. So it's very easy to overly lean on kind of external and third-party tools. Like something like Crown Peak, where, it'll scan your site. It's going to find things. It's going to find images that don't have alt text. Cool.
Yep.
That's easy. And that is a very easy fix. What it's not going to do necessarily is mimic that actual experience a person will have using a page reader. So I think that is one of the easiest things you can do, is just try to experience it like someone using that actual tool. And be very wary of third-party tools that are out there that claim to, you plug it in and suddenly your site's accessible. Those can be red flags to people in the space that are looking at it from how, I'd like to file a lawsuit and make as much money as I can off of this brand. Those are kind of like waving the red flag in front of the bull of legal action. It's not great. So I think understanding the basics really of the mechanics of how somebody uses a page reader is really critical, because then you can have, first of all, more customer empathy for the experience that somebody's having. But there are a lot of little subtle things that even a page scanner will not pick up on. And those are the things that really matter at the end of the day. You can make sure all your images have alt text, but at the same time, like, what about your navigation? And like you said, I think that's such a great example, thinking about design. ADA compliance is the thing that designers never want to hear, because they of course want to make everything as beautiful as possible with all this functionality. And it's not great always being the bearer of bad news of like, yeah, that's going to take a lot of work to make that ADA compliant. I'm not sure it's worth the resources, because there are things like you adding an accordion, adding a drop down, adding some kind of functionality on a marketing landing page that can create possibly like 15 to 20 additional hours of work to try to make it compliant. And it's really about balancing those resources and understanding, is this feature worthwhile enough? Will it drive enough revenue to justify the amount of resources that will have to go into this in order to make it compliant? It's just a constant balancing act between cost and benefit. So it's constantly evaluating that.
Yeah, talk about that a little more, because I think, I was talking to Michael K from OkCupid last week, and we were talking specifically about, one of the biggest things is attributing everything that we do across the marketing and e-commerce and operations sphere back to revenue, which in some cases isn't a very easy direct line. And in the space that we're in now, with a very competitive job landscape, people are shifting marketing resources around and calling them something else. How are you tying what you're doing on a daily basis back to revenue, and really talking about that balance, like you said, of costs and opportunity?
Yeah, I would say in my role, I really straddle the line of like IT and development and marketing. So it's really kind of right in that space, which is a great place to be when you kind of understand both sides and you can help balance both sides. I'd say one of the things in the web development world is, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And that is kind of something I've lived by. When you have somebody in the C-suite who's like, we really want to do this. Can we do it? I mean, we can. Is it the best use of our resources at this time? Probably not. So I think that is understanding the balance of having a finite amount of resources to use towards all of your development challenges and your whole roadmap. And then also understanding the kind of impact, the effort to impact on the other side of, we could do this thing. What if we do all this work and it only drives an additional $500 worth of revenue? Was that worth it? How much do you pay your developer? Think about that hourly cost and balance that out. And usually when you explain it in that way, it suddenly becomes a lot less of a priority if you will literally lose money by adding some feature that someone is just really attached to. So I think I am in a unique position to be able to kind of balance that cost and the benefit, because I can see them both. In a lot of organizations, that's not necessarily the case unless you're just working really, really closely and really collaboratively together. But in our case, it's really easy to see. This is how many hours it would take. That's how much it costs. This is what we expect this to add an added value to this landing page, or to this, whatever, this product page, whatever it might be in the e-commerce scenario or marketing scenario. And is it worth it? How much incremental value does that actually have to the customer? Or do we just like it? We've got to work around those biases that we have about things we like versus things that our customers value. They're not always the same.
Unfortunately, no. And everybody in the company that you're working for probably has different opinions on
Everyone
what
has
the
an opinion.
customer actually wants.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
No, I love that. I think that's great. I think that's such a great thing, is reframing that conversation with your superiors a lot of the time. Because yes, this particular function that we're trying to do or not do isn't directly bringing in, like for me, it's not bringing in ticket sales, or it's not bringing in whatever it is, but it is cost savings and it is liability savings, that type of thing. Reframing that can do a lot for your position and understanding what you're doing well. So I do want to switch over a little bit just to talk a little bit more about data privacy, specifically a little bit more about what you're going to be talking about in your session. So the cookieless internet, it's here. It's scary, but we're here for it. Marketers just have to run with every punch that comes our way. So what is your prediction for this year as this becomes more prevalent, on how marketers can be successful, probably having to throw away some of the campaigns and the strategies that they've used for the last few years?
Well, first, I believe in the human innovation, and I believe we're going to overcome this. I just want to start with that. Like, we're going to get through this and it's going to be okay. My predictions would include more CPG brands that are not selling necessarily direct to consumer, gathering more customer data, gathering more first party data. we are very lucky. We have a very robust D2C operation at OLLY and on olly.com, so that we have been gathering customer data for a long time. I mean, both first party and zero party. So we have quite a database to work with, but not every CPG is in a space where that's an option for them. If you're selling yogurt, you're not necessarily going to open a D2C store and start shipping yogurt across the country. So I think it is really what we're going to see are these brands, maybe more traditional CPG, kind of grocery, brick and mortar brands, doing more outreach from their brand sites to gather that first party data. I think there's going to be more content to try to engage those customers, understanding that I'm trying to use an example of a brand without like using an example of a brand. Let's say Chapstick's in the news. They just got acquired. It's not necessarily the same level of risk of shipping chapstick across the country as yogurt, but it does melt. So yeah, maybe it is. I think they're going to be like, Chapstick could create more content around what their products do, just about health in general, health and wellness, seasonality, and using that content to engage customers, to give their information, to sign up for emails, to sign up for SMS, and really work that first party data angle. I think we're going to see more brands that we haven't seen necessarily in the data gathering business, which is of course a risk for data privacy, because that may not be a strength for those marketers. And so it'll be very important for them to kind of school themselves in the basics of privacy protection.
Yeah, it's another one of those great shifts in the marketing role I think that we're seeing is yes, we've had all this data and it's been easy to work with. And we're just, for a lot of people, probably just learning how to do it well. And then it's like, oh, we're going to get rid of that. You need to go out there and source it yourself. But, for me as a consumer, I appreciate that. I would rather that the companies who are using my data and using it to sell me products are getting it from me first and managing it responsibly. So I've always walked that line as a marketer of like, people talking about how creepy it is that companies know things about them. I'm like, oh, that's just marketing. Like that's just the information. I'm like, that's how the world runs on it. But no, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. And for us as marketers and in the marketing space to challenge ourselves to really dig into that and understand the baseline of why you can still be successful, through those initiatives, and have a more meaningful product at the end of the day and a more meaningful relationship with your audience. So absolutely. I think it's going to be really cool. All right. Well, I'm going to close up just because we are running out of time, but it was so lovely to have you on. I cannot wait for you to join us in Orlando. This is your first time speaking at Digital Summit.
It is. Right? I'm very excited.
Okay. So excited
to be in Orlando in February. It's going to be much better than most places in this country, I think.
100%. After this deep freeze, everybody's going to be so ready to be down there. So that's happening February 26th through the 27th. Renaissance at SeaWorld is where we're going to be. Registered attendees, we got some cool things coming your way, some giveaways that are going to be given up around before and after the show. If you haven't registered yet, early bird prices are going to go up on February 9th. So get those done soon. And aside from having an amazing session with Jennifer while you're there, you're going to get to meet the whole Digital Summit team, all of our amazing agenda of speakers and conference sessions to really just dig in and get ready for 2024. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Have
a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much.
Thanks.